We ready to start, Carter?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and start the pre-meeting, and we'll start off with sole source purchase of 64 sets of Globe firefighting turnout gear from L&N Curtis and Sons. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, everybody. It's good to be with you today. The fire department has a need to pick up the sets of gear that the mayor just described, but do it in a sole source format in order to have consistent equipment and maintenance and so forth with regard to this very important piece of the firefighters' equipment toolbox, if you will. If you don't mind, I'd like to have Chief Solberg kind of walk through that a little bit for us. Although I don't think I see him on the call. Chief Spicer's on the call. There we go. Hey, Chief, if you can walk us through this a little bit, that'd be helpful. If you don't mind, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Council, City Manager, this is Chief Spicer. Yeah, this sole source purchase will get all of our personnel a second set of bunker gear. And a big part of that is our cancer prevention measures. Anytime we go into a structure fire, the gear they're in has to immediately be taken out of service and washed. Anytime we have environmental issues like sub-zero temperatures, that stuff freezes solid on us too. It makes it virtually unusable. So it's really vital that we have a second set of bunker gears. Just anytime we go in a structure fire, that way our crews can get that stuff clean. One, they're protecting themselves. Two, they're protecting the public by not taking those carcinogens into medical calls on the next few calls. And then Globe turnout gear, we've researched their stuff pretty thoroughly, and they're one of the only systems out there that has the proper cuffs around the ankles and wrists where a lot of those carcinogens get in, and the vapor barriers. And Boston Fire Department's actually done a pretty thorough study on that, and this was the gear that they recommended for the best cancer prevention. And then in the memo, it also recommends that just like any form of PPE, they're a 10-year replacement cycle. So pretty much all of our helmets, everything has to be replaced every 10 years. And we replace 7 sets annually to try to keep up with this, but then it just catches up to us eventually. So we have to make this big one-time purchase to get everybody caught up and within those 10-year limits on their primary and backup sets of bunker gear.
So, Mr. Mayor, if it pleases the council, we'd like to proceed with that type of a purchase, a sole source purchase along the lines of what Chief Spicer just addressed for us.
Okay. Are there any questions or concerns about moving forward on this purchase? Councilman Cathy.
Are we going to wind up then throughout the next 10 years starting to replace some of this early, or is there going to be another mass purchase in 10 years?
Yeah, so what we've had to do is we replace those 7 sets continually every year for the next 10 years, and it gets most of those replaced, but then it will require another big purchase probably close to 10 years from now, because 10 years ago-ish is when we made the last big purchase. It just kind of catches up with us between just the way that the equipment cycles in and out, the wear and tear due to training and retirements and everything like that. But yeah, we do a pretty good job of cycling it through. If the bunker gear from retired guys has some life left in it, we definitely give that to the new guys if it fits appropriately. Yep, we definitely replace every year, 7 sets every year. We've been doing it the past 10 years or so, I believe. So yep, we do have that replacement cycle in place.
Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It seems to me that if we're going to double the actual fleet of gear, that the 10-year cycle may not be appropriate. And I guess I would like the department, well, I approve of this purchase. I would like the department to take a look at duty cycle. It really means that we will have twice the number of units, and therefore they would get a duty cycle of 50%. So while I approve this first time out, I would like us to take a peek next year when we go to replace the cycled out unit. Look at maybe regarding duty.
we definitely will do that. We take a look at that. We're trying to come up with the most efficient way to do this for sure. And a lot of this, this is going to give everybody a second set, but a lot of their primary sets right now are getting close to that 10-year cycle. So that's why we do the 7 years to try to keep those people in current gear, compliant gear.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? You just need a thumbs up. If I can get a thumbs up. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All right, thank you. Okay, we will move on to the reopening plan. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This portion of tonight's pre-meeting agenda was really dedicated to the opportunity for council to ask any questions or seek clarification with respect to the aspects of the opening plan that we've incurred so far and what it is that you might have questions about that potentially we can look into for you or address further. As council is aware, the reopening plan is coming together in phases. The first phase, of course, included salons and personal care type businesses. And as you know, they were opened with conditions that required distancing where possible and PPE as well. The second phase that we are going through currently, and as a matter of fact was launched yesterday, was with regard to restaurants and being able to serve their products in an outdoor environment. We are hopeful that another phase is forthcoming toward the end of this week. And, you know, it could include additional phasing as it relates to businesses such as restaurants being able to expand the ways in which they serve their clientele. That of course, is pending very specific language that the state would issue, and we're waiting to see what that might include for now. But beyond that, Mr. Mayor, that's really where that's all at. And if there are other questions or other things that we need to look into, Mr. Mayor, we'd be happy to take that direction.
Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask right now? And I'll add that we are going to have a discussion at the end, towards the end of the council meeting tonight about a few things that have come up. But if you have specific questions right now that we can give the manager, let me know. Councilman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First off, I think you folks have done an excellent job with this plan, and it's just very clear as far as how we're going to assess the level of risk. We all want it to be a linear movement toward openness and return to normalcy or as close as we can. But we obviously have to be mindful of the fact that it may not be. In fact, we could actually have some additional problems that put us back a few weeks or even months. Does the plan have in place a way for us to make the very difficult decision to say we're going too fast, we need to walk it back and take away some of these things that we already opened up? As a worst case scenario.
Mr. Mayor, that was a question, right? With regard,
I believe.
Okay, I just want to be sure. That, I think, is a worst-case scenario that, at least locally, the health docs have been cleared to identify as a possibility, pending uncomfortable surges in infections and infection rates and that kind of thing. We certainly hope, I'm sure everybody does, that we don't have to go in that direction, but that the health docs have been pretty clear that that is a possibility pending very negative data as a result of these businesses kind of moving slowly into an opening status.
Does that answer your question, Councilman Powell? Go ahead.
It did, but just to follow, Mr. Mayor, are there metrics in place so that it would be pretty clear when a threshold is reached that would require us to walk back?
Mr. Mayor, I have to confess, Councilman Powell, that I have not laid eyes on those metrics, but I do know that among the community of health docs throughout the state and in concert with the state, those metrics do exist.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. We'll bring up the rest at the end. We'll move on to Boulder Park.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are pleased to bring to you an opportunity to partner with our local Rotary Club for the extra development, if you will, and added development of a feature in our Crossroads Park area with respect to a bouldering type facility. We have sent to you a presentation that included renderings of what this development will look like and the path that our partners are pursuing. And tonight, we wanted to give you the opportunity to ask questions and get a stronger feel for what's taking place in regards to that potential expansion. We do need council's blessing, as it were, to continue to move forward. And certainly we want to obtain that in order for this partnership to continue. And council may need to see an agreement as well as a sort of a formal step to be taken from here on out. So we do have our local Rotary president here with us this evening, as well as Mr. Cortez, who has been working with our local club. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to turn time over to Mr. Cortez and Mr. Griffith to give you additional information and answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Who do you want to start?
Why don't we lead off with Mr. Cortez and go from there?
Okay. Mr. Cortez?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Carter did a really nice job of teeing that up. The only thing I would add is, with the slides that I provided council for review, there's one slide that shows an overview of Crossroads, and it shows 3 different squares on that labeled 1, 2, and 3. For those of you that might just be curious, the preferred location at number. Anyways, I was getting a lot of feedback there, but anyways, that number 3 square is kind of where we are locating it. There's still a lot of details to work out, but as the city manager pointed out, we're kind of looking for council's blessing to keep going with this endeavor and kind of hammer out some of the finer details of the park, which you would see in that second slide, the kind of the rendering with the park. The park would be kind of completed in 2 phases. The actual boulders and kind of what's in that slide would be phase 1. And phase 2 would actually include a community restroom. Furthermore, we do have Mr. John Griffith on the phone, who's the Rotary president. I guess I would release the balance of time to him if there were no other questions.
Okay. Mr. Griffith.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes.
I guess I want to start by saying that the process of finalizing this particular project started a long time ago, and the first, we sat down and put through a handful of criteria. One of the first ones was that we wanted to continue our long-standing partnership with the city, and through this process of design and kind of coming up with this idea, the city has been a great, continues to be a great partner. We look forward to that continuing as well. I don't want to waste time going through all the history of how we got to where we are, but I will say we have developed some great partnerships with the city, with Visit Casper, with the local climbing community, and others to kind of come up with this concept. And this addresses a need that the community has in this particular location at Crossroads Adventure Playground, where we're able to serve a larger portion of the community, not just those, say, under around 10 or 12 years of age, and something that we hope to enhance that the playground that's already been built, but then also bring to one of the things I think is exciting is bring to the attention of the region and also members of our own community of how exceptional the climbing is around Casper, and this provides kind of an entry level into that. We've had some initial discussions with the local school district here about potentially having this part of their lifetime sports program and things like that. But it's kind of a tenet of Rotary International as a whole to provide healthy lifestyle living, and this kind of adds to that. So I would certainly be happy to go into as much detail as possible, or as anyone would like, or answer any questions if anybody has those.
Any questions? Okay, it doesn't look like there's any questions. I'm getting a thumbs up from Councilman Hopkins. Okay, thumbs up. Looks like it. Okay. All right, we'll move on to WHAM resolutions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to the Rotary Club. We appreciate your partnership. The next item that we have this evening is a review of the WHAM resolutions, not to any great detail, but more along the lines of making sure that you've had the opportunity to reflect upon the newer resolutions that we did not have in your packet during the work session that we went over this information a few weeks ago. Tonight you have a consent item that adopts these resolutions, if you will, and moves them forward to the deliberation process that WHAM carries forward. So with that, Mr. Mayor, if there are questions, I do have Jolene on the line to help walk us through some of the nuances and the detail. You'll recall that the two newer resolutions were in relation to the home rule support that council wanted to see WHAM take on, as well as the possibility of moving forward some ideas pertaining to 911 surcharges.
Okay. Any questions or comments from anybody? Looks like everybody's good. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the last item, agenda review. Mr. City Manager, do we have anything on there?
Mr. Mayor, the only couple things we have is that I would want to bring to your attention. Tonight would be the night that we would ostensibly remove the liquor license ordinance from the table and finish the first reading process this evening potentially. Councilwoman Lutz and Councilman Hopkins have been attending meetings with City Attorney Henley to go over some of that information and potentially bring back a recommendation to this body. The other thing I wanted to bring to your attention, we do need to remove the CNFR agreement off of tonight's agenda, hopefully table it for completion in the next business meeting, which would actually be the 19th. In that NYRA has pointed out some things that they're not comfortable with that we need to work through. And I'm confident that by the 19th, we can have those things resolved and ready to move forward in a formal way with all of you.
Okay, so we need to table that this evening?
Yes, and you should have that scripting already available to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything on agenda? Councilman Bates.
I sent out an email earlier in the week about it's not the property maintenance code, but the unsafe one on the consent, and about removing that from the consent, tabling it a little bit later, just due to the, as I put it, the uncertain times that we are in, and it possibly put more of that negative issues on our community, our citizens. And so I sent that email, never heard anything back, so I just would like to see it off for a later date to go be put back on, but just hold off a little bit longer while we're trying to get through these tough times.
Councilman Huber.
Mr. Mayor, I sent an email. It's always troubling to me that we can't send emails directly to all of our fellow members. But I would object to, quote, putting this off. This is a safety issue. You don't put safety issues off just because, some members of the community are suffering some hardship. I think it'd just be a real tragedy if we had something negative happen and then we were sitting there saying, oh, well, we didn't have an ordinance in place that might have prevented this. You don't delay safety things. Nature doesn't work that way. When it's a matter of safety, we need to take that first, and we need to move forward with this and have an up or down, yes or no vote on the proposed ordinance change.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. We want to just go straight into it, or?
Sure thing.
Good timing.
Good timing. Okay. We're right at 6 o'clock, so I'll now call the May 5th, 2020 regular council meeting to order. For those of you that will be calling in to speak with council tonight, please mute or turn off your YouTube or TV broadcast when we connect with you. It is hard to hear callers over the sound, and there is a delay in both of these systems. During the around the table portion of the meeting, council will be discussing COVID-19 issues, so that'll be later in the evening. Please call the roll.
Mayor, if I may, I believe all members are present.
Okay. Council meetings are televised and can be viewed on cable channel 192. Council meetings are also streamed live on YouTube, and links to previous meetings are available on our webpage. Public comments will be taken by telephone during the appropriate parts of the meeting. The chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the April 12th, 2020 regular council meeting as published in the Casper Star Tribune on April 30th of 2020.
So moved. Hopkins.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, second by Vice Mayor Lutz. Any amendments? Please call the roll and record the vote.
Councilman Kathy.
Aye.
Councilman Powell. Councilman Bates.
Did you hear me? Aye.
Yes, thank you.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz. Aye. Mayor Friel.
Aye.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the April 21st, 2020 executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Huber, second by Councilman Johnson. Any amendments? Please call the roll and record the vote.
Councilman Kathy.
Aye.
Councilman Powell.
Aye.
Councilman Bates.
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz. Mayor Friel.
Aye.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the minutes of the April 28th, 2020 special council meeting as published in the Casper Star Tribune on April 30th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Cathy, second by Councilman Hopkins. Any amendments? Please call the roll and record the vote.
Councilman Cathy.
Aye.
Councilman Powell.
Aye.
Councilman Bates.
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz. Mayor Friel.
Aye.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve by minute action the May 5th, 2020 bills and claims as audited by City Manager Napier.
So moved.
Second.
Is that moved by Councilman Johnson, second by Councilman Bates? Any abstentions? Please call the roll and record the vote.
Councilman Cathy.
Aye.
Councilman Powell.
Aye.
Councilman Bates.
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz. Mayor Friel.
Aye.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Okay, we'll move on to bright spots in our community. Drinking Water Week proclamation. The city joins the America Waterworks Association and the rest of its members in celebrating Drinking Water Week across the country. The water professionals who work for Casper's Public Utilities Division, especially the Water Treatment Plant and Water Distribution Division, maintain the system 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I'd like to read a proclamation prepared to honor Drinking Water Week. Proclamation, whereas water is our most valuable natural resource, and whereas only tap water delivers public health protection, fire protection, support for our economy, and the quality of life we enjoy. And whereas any measure of a successful society, low mortality rates, economic growth and diversity, productivity, and public safety are in some way related to access to safe water. And whereas we are all stewards of the water infrastructure upon which future generations depend on. And whereas each citizen of our city is called upon to help protect our source waters from pollution, to protect water conservation, and to get involved in local water issues by getting to know their water. Now, therefore, I, Stephen K. Friel, Mayor of the City of Casper, Wyoming, do hereby declare the week of May 3rd through the 9th, 2020 as Drinking Water Week, and to ask our residents to join us in celebrating our water professionals who are instrumental in bringing this vital strategic resource to our community. In witness thereof, I hereunto set my hand and cause the official seal of the City of Casper, Wyoming, to be affixed this 3rd day of May, 2020. The City Council would like to thank our water professionals for high quality, reliable tap water, and please remember them when you're washing your hands throughout this week. We will now move on to communications from persons present. One, okay.
Present.
Present. Virtual. guess while we're waiting, I could read the rest of the script. So now is the time we invite public comment. As stated on the first page of the agenda, we ask the following. Please state your name and address. Direct all questions, comments to the mayor and only the mayor. No personal attacks on staff or council will...
Transfer whenever you can.
No personal attacks on staff or council will be tolerated. Council will not respond to personnel matters. These will be referred to the city manager. Questions posed by speakers may or may not be responded to by council members. Presentations are limited to 5 minutes, and duplication of speakers will not be allowed, nor will time extensions be permitted. When calling in, please mute or turn off the YouTube or TV broadcast. It is hard to hear callers over the sound, and there is a delay in both of these systems. The public comment phone number is area code 307-235-8215. So do we have any callers at this time? Is it Linda Bergeron? Do we have somebody, a caller on the line? Ms. Burt? Okay.
Just one moment, we're transferring her in.
Okay.
Remember the days when you used to have technical difficulties on your TV?
And they would always cut in and say, "One moment, please."
We lost the caller, and she is not picking up when we try to return the call. So we will try and call her a few more times. We've been calling her, and she's not picking up now.
Okay. Mr. Manager, could we just move on to the next item, and if we do get her on the phone, we could come back to this? Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and move on to establishing dates of public hearings.
We have her. We have her.
Oh,
One moment, we have her.
Not.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
That commercial where they're like holding up $1 on a fishing line. He's like, "Oh, you almost got it."
Right.
Hello, this is Linda Bergeron.
I believe we have Miss Linda Bergeron on the line.
Okay, Ms. Bergeron, go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Linda Bergeron. I live at 2355 South Larkspur. I'm calling about an item on the consent item agenda, item A, regarding unsafe structures and equipment. I would like to see that postponed to a later date in order to rework that so it doesn't include private homes. I'm very concerned that we're losing our rights of private property. Our private property, as you know, if you look at your Declaration of Independence, that was one of the reasons for the Declaration in the first place is we needed to be safe in our private property, our bills, our effects, and that shouldn't be challenged at any time by any government. So I think that that needs to be postponed and it needs to be reworked. And it's inappropriate for this to go any further forward. For generations, the Supreme Court has called protection of the individual rights the bedrock of the American principles. Those who ratified our Bill of Rights knew how vital these rights were to the very preservation of our liberty. Among these rights are those that the founders would formally declare as being absolutely essential to life itself: freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and the ability, along with individual rights, to keep and bear arms, and the security of personal property, indispensable rights of due process. And I believe that this ordinance takes away those rights, and this should not happen in America. And so I would request that this be taken off the consent agenda and postponed to a time that it can be reworked and not include private property and the homes of individuals in Natrona County. Thank you for your consideration of my request, and I will be watching to see how the vote occurs. And I do intend to inform all my friends and as many as I can reach about this ordinance so that people are watching. And it is an election year. And so if you're up for election, I would be very careful how you vote. Thank you very much for your help.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Councilman Cathy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Seems like several people have some misconceptions that all we're doing tonight is establishing May the 19th for a public hearing for this ordinance. We aren't actually voting for this ordinance tonight, as the way I read our agenda this evening. Is that not a correct statement?
No, that's a correct statement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any, oh, go ahead, Vice Mayor Lutz.
Just on this note, because I feel like this is kind of becoming like a theme, I don't think any of us are up here voting for things simply for the purpose of reelection. We vote for things whether we personally feel like they're right or wrong, or depending on constituent feedback and things of that nature. I just wanted to make that clear, because I think that that is becoming really common rhetoric, and we're not solely focused on reelection. We're focused on doing what's right for our community.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any other callers?
We do not.
Okay. And we will move on to establish dates of public hearings. Please read the consent agenda titles.
Establishing May 19th, 2020 as the public hearing date for consideration of the following 4 items. Item 8A1A, approving a municipal code text amendment to sections 15.02.120 and 15.04.070 regarding unsafe structures and equipment. Item 8A1B, approving a zone change of lots 344 and 345 of the Kenwoods Addition subdivision from R2 1-unit residential to C2 general business. Item 8A1C, a vacation and replat of Lot 1, Block 1, Cemetery Addition to create the Gorgon Hills Addition subdivision comprising 31.52 acres more or less, generally located south of West 46th Street and east of Moose Street. And item 8A1D, a new restaurant liquor license numbered 44 for Occasions by Corey LLC, doing business as Occasions Entertainment Group located at 303 South Walcott Street.
The chair would entertain a motion by minute action to establish the public hearing dates just read.
Sorry about that. So moved.
Okay, moved by Councilman Powell, second by Councilman Hopkins. Please call the roll and record the vote.
Councilman Kathy.
Aye.
Councilman Powell.
Aye.
Councilman Bates.
No to A1A.
Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Aye.
Mayor Friel.
Aye.
With Councilman Bates voting on nay on item 8A1A, motion passed.
I now declare the public hearing open for the consideration of ordinance amending Chapter 8.40 pertaining to litter control. Mr. City Attorney, do you have any exhibits?
Thank you, Your Honor. Tonight we have two exhibits. Exhibit number 1, correspondence from Liz Becker to J. Carter Napier, dated April 22, 2020. And exhibit number 2, affidavit of publication, is published in the Casper Star Tribune, dated April 14, 2020.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the opportunity for council to consider an amendment to the ordinance pertaining to liquor control, specifically as it relates to the maintenance of construction sites and the prevention of wind-borne debris. The amendment consists of the addition of 2 words as it describes the location of these trash facilities, including with covers. And with that, Mr. Mayor, we would turn it over to the council to consider this on first reading.
Okay. Council will now listen to public comment. Public hearing comments are limited to 5 minutes and no duplication of speakers will be allowed. The public comment phone number is area code 307-235-8215. Do we have anyone wishing to speak in favor or opposition to the issues involving litter control?
I have Mr. Joe Toops on the line. I'm going to join the call.
Okay.
Mr. Toops is on the line.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Toops.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, Mr. Manager. I just wanted to discuss tonight an email I had sent out to you guys. I wanted to just follow up on that about the lids on dumpsters. I wasn't advocating for solid lids on dumpsters at all. I think that'd be very dangerous, and we're talking construction dumpsters here. What I'd like to see is what they're already prepped for is a kind of a rope, say a 3x3 pattern, not a fine mesh, but a soft top on those. And after being on the job sites all week, I looked at all the dumpsters, and they're already prepped for that. They have D-rings and U-rings welded to the side of them. And I think that would be a very efficient way to contain all the construction debris that blows in our wind around here. So just wanted to clear that up. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to take them.
Thank you. Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Toops, for your feedback. I read your letter, and I concur with your position. Those solid lids, whether they're steel or plastic, they create a danger in themselves. But I think just the idea of a net, it's very similar to what we require when somebody hauls something to our landfill. We request that they at least have it tied down, and I concur with your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else with question or comments? Councilman Bates.
Could you purchase something like that, or would they have to be specially made for that? Because I've never seen one for those size of dumpsters before.
Mr. Bates, I'm sure they could be accessed. If I were the dumpster contractor, I would want to sell those to the general contractors. The reason I would like to see a larger net than what is currently on the trucks is the wind can get those nets that are on the truck. They're kind of a fine mesh. I think a 3x3 or 4x4 netting could be brought down easily, could be opened up easily. The guy who picks up the dumpster could dump it off on the site and just leave it till he brought the dumpster back. But with all my experience in contracting, if I could just open a corner of that dumpster and throw all my trash in there and close it back down, hook it to the side of the dumpster, I think we'd be in business.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Mr. Toops? Okay, thank you, Mr. Toops. Do we have anyone else wishing to speak in favor or opposition to the issues involving litter control?
We have two more callers. I'm going to add one to the line and just. We have a Mr. Erickson on the line.
Okay.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. My name is Leroy Erickson. I'm the general manager for Waste Connections of Wyoming, located 40 North 6 Mile Road in Casper. I wanted to comment on the changes to the ordinance 8.4.050 concerning covers on containers on construction sites. The wording that is in the change just says with. This is a very vague wording for what needs to happen here. I'm mainly concerned with our large roll-off containers that are placed on construction sites. All these are about wide, about 22 feet long, and about 6 inches tall. With the wording that's in there that just says with cover, not specify what type of cover we are looking for here. Who is responsible to cover the container? Owner? Is it the agent? Is it the is it the hauler? Who is responsible for covering the containers? And I have issues with safety, issues with liability. I have issues, have issues with, right in my head now, ability and just the cost. So if you, to the contractor to be able to cover, the owner is whatever is most available to cover that container. Anything from plywood used for siding or roofing to some sort of tarping. A tarp on the container itself is going to have to be of 12 foot wide, foot long. Any one of these things are pulled to the wind in Casper, Wyoming, and can be taken off the top of one of these containers and sent flying across any construction site, potentially cause injury to construction work, to bystanders. This is, to me, is a huge safety issue. And then we also have the issue when one of my goes to a construction site to service one of these large containers, they would then be responsible to remove whatever type of that any kind of makeshift cover that a contractor on the container. And this then of injury on a day in Wyoming when the wind's blowing 60, 70, 80 miles per hour. Now, if the contractor or if the hauler is then responsible to have covers on these containers, these would be fixed covers. And I have spoken with both DK Hauling and with the city of Casper itself. And there is not a good adaptable fixed cover that you can put on one of these large containers that is adaptable to the weather conditions we have in Casper, Wyoming. These types of lids are on a hydraulic jack system where they're jacked open, and if they're open, it's a lid that sticks up in the air. The wind could take it. It could potentially blow the entire container over on its side, causing damage or injury to anybody in the area. And then we have the thing of liability. If somebody is injured because they are removing or putting on one of these covers or in the area around one of these covers, who's liable for that at that point? Is the owner liable? Is the contractor liable? Is the hauler liable? Who's going to be responsible for that person potentially injured? It could honestly be the city of Casper liable for requiring the lids to be, or covers to be, on the containers. And then you also have the question of cost. These containers, if you are going to put fixed lids on these large roll-off containers, these containers are at a cost of approximately $2,500 per container. And that is just the cost of the cover itself. That does not include the installation cost or the maintenance cost for these covers. To me, the solution to the litter control on construction sites is not to require that these large containers be covered all the time. It is to fall back to the city ordinance that is already in place that states that all trash that is potential to wind blow be secured, bagged, tied securely, and placed securely into these containers. Then when we come to service them, we cover them with a tarp and we haul them to the city of Casper landfill. All of these things, to me, the solution is not to require every container on every construction site be covered. It is to enforce the ordinance that is already in place that says you need to control the litter on the site.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Erickson. Are there any questions of Mr. Erickson? Okay. Thank you, sir. Oh, wait a minute. We do have a question for you. Councilman Bates.
Yes.
The other gentleman that spoke earlier about doing a kind of netting, a rope netting. I don't know if you heard his suggestion, but what is your thoughts on that?
Well, rope netting, it's an option, yes. But then, again, when you have one of my employees come to a site to service that container, he is then going to have to remove that rope netting. It's going to get hung up on whatever may be in that container. We're going to be fighting that thing. Again, we put my employee at risk here trying to fight that thing off the top of the container.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Erickson.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We had one other caller on the line. She said she agreed with the last caller and you answered all her questions, or he answered all her questions, made her statements. Her name was Miss Margaret Bloom, and she just wanted me to share with you that, but she did not want to remain on the line to speak to you since he already covered it.
Okay. And that was our last caller?
Correct. That's it.
Okay. So there being no others to speak for or against the issues involving litter control, I now declare the public hearing closed. Please read the ordinance by title only.
An ordinance amending Chapter 8.40 of the Casper Municipal Code pertaining to litter control.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve on first reading the ordinance just read.
So moved, Ken.
Moved by
Okay.
Councilman Bates, second by Councilman Pacheco. Any discussion? Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really believe, I understand that lids are going to be a problem, but I think the netting is really the answer. We have used this successfully at our landfill for a number of years, and I know that it's going to be a maintenance issue, but the bottom line is it's a maintenance issue to begin with. And I can really see a lot of the contractors going around after the workday is over or in days when the wind is up, that they say, look, that's got to be on there every night when we walk out of here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Kathy.
What I'm wondering about too is potentially if we should change the wording there in Part B, and instead of stating it with covers, maybe state it that the owner, agent, or contractor shall maintain the containers in such a manner as to prevent windblown litter, and then that meets standards prescribed in Chapter 8.32. And that allows, you aren't so hung up on covers. You just have to maintain it in such a manner as to prevent windblown litter. And if you have, like in the first phases of construction, when all you're doing is framing and you have heavy lumber, there's probably no reason for a cover on it. So you wouldn't have to necessarily put anything on there, and you would be maintaining it in such a manner to prevent windblown litter. But as things move on, if you wind up with trash that could be blown, then you start either covering it or you make sure you put heavy refuse on top of the things that could be windblown. And then, as the other gentleman stated, if they don't do that, you fall back to the previous ordinance that says you're supposed to maintain your site without windblown litter.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, any amendments? All right, please call the roll and record the vote. Oh. Councilman Kathy.
I guess as an amendment, I would move to change the wording, as I just stated, in Part B of the ordinance.
I second that.
I'll second.
Okay, so I have an amendment on the table, floor, whatever you want to call it. Councilman Kathy, do you want to repeat the verbiage that you want in there?
It would be, Part B would state the owner, agent, or contractor shall maintain the containers in such a manner as to prevent windblown litter that meets standards prescribed by Chapter 8.32 of this code, and then continue on as stated in the rest of the Part B.
Okay, so that motion was put on the table, is seconded by Councilman Bates. Any discussion on that? Just a moment, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could direct a question real quickly to Director Becker. Who has the responsibility right now pursuant to the language that's in the ordinance currently in regards to maintaining the site to be free and clear of debris and other issues that might be against code?
The contractor or the owner.
So the
They're doing their own project. Pardon me, I'm sorry.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilman Powell first, and I'll come back to you, Councilman Kathy.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think I can support Councilman Cathy's amendment, but I would like to give staff the opportunity at our next work session to comment on whether those changes would restrict them in any way, since none of us have actually been out trying to monitor these sites and control the debris. I assume there's a good reason why the current ordinance hasn't been sufficient, and I'd like to give our staff an opportunity to explain that and basically comment on whether this change in any way limits them compared to the simple change that was proposed. So I will vote yes with the, but I hope again that we can carve out some time to get some comments from staff on whether this will work for them.
Okay, Councilman Cathy?
Yes, what I was interested in and what I was going to ask about is if I read Section A right, it says right there, owner, agent, or contractor in charge of construction. So if the agent is in charge of the construction, or is it if it's the owner, but basically it's the project manager that's running the job, if I'm interpreting Part A of the ordinance appropriately.
Okay, Councilman Huber, did you have some?
I do. I don't think I like this proposed amendment very much. You know, one of the problems, we don't have to legislate because of the best workers, the best practices. You know, what we have to consider is, you know, who are those who just get by with the very minimum? You know, in essence, we have to legislate to protect the community against the worst practices and the worst practitioners out there. What I'm concerned with about this is it introduces a lot of vagueness into this whole thing. I can already hear these guys saying, well, I thought that this was good enough to hold everything down, but I guess it wasn't. And I thought that those boards would hold that down and blah, blah, blah. And we'd be right where we are now with, you know, neighbors having to complain about construction debris blowing all around their neighborhood. And then if you want to sit there and say, well, okay, we're going to go back and make the contractors responsible for this, I can hear some of these guys saying, well, I don't think that came from my side. I think it came from the side up the street. So I don't think this amendment would be a step in the right direction. In fact, I think it would be a step in the wrong direction. And also, I think that the city attorney might back me up on this. Anytime you introduce any vagueness into an ordinance or into a law, that vagueness, as a rule of statutory construction, will always be construed against the enforcing entity, the city, and in favor of the person who's charged with violating that. And so I think we'd just be making this whole thing virtually unenforceable. And so I don't care for this amendment, though it sounds good on the surface.
Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Hoover. I tend to agree with part of what you're saying, but the bottom line is I have a difficulty with the owner of the bin or the contractor who's responsible. And I would say, really, what we're really trying to say, we say the owner or the contractor, what we're really trying to say is the guy that rented the bin to somebody else, the leasee, if you will, he is the guy that's responsible for it. In most cases, that's going to be the contractor. In some cases, it might be the owner of the property. And so what I'm saying is that the guy that wants to have the bins on property is the guy that's going to be responsible, whether he's the contractor, the plumbing contractor, the sheetrock contractor, or the cardboard. That guy is the guy that's going to be responsible for doing it. So I don't think it has a lot of vagueness in it. The guy that is paying for the lease of the bins, it's pretty hard to hold the guy that owns the bins responsible for how somebody uses them. But the guy that leases them is the guy that's responsible. Thank you.
Councilman Huber.
Mr. Mayor, the vagueness that I was referring to is the vagueness in terms of, when Councilman Cathy started talking about this, instead of just requiring it that it be covered, saying that, well, it needed to be maintained in such a way that the stuff wouldn't blow away. And I'm paraphrasing Councilman Cathy's language there. That's the vagueness that I'm concerned with.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, so on the amendment itself, will you please call the roll and record the vote?
Councilman Cathy.
Aye.
Councilman Powell.
Aye.
Councilman Bates.
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco.
Nay.
Councilman Huber.
No.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Aye.
Mayor Friel.
Nay.
With Mayor Friel, council members Pacheco and Huber voting nay, motion to amend passed.
Okay, so with the amended motion back to the original motion that's been passed or has been seconded, any further discussion on it? Councilman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to restate my request that we place on the work session agenda for next week the opportunity for staff to comment on whether this amendment impairs their ability to enforce reasonable safety and control, and that if they are persuasive that this is not a helpful change, then I would make an amendment to go back to the original language, but I'd like to give them that opportunity next week.
Mr. City Manager? Okay, we can do that. Okay, if there's no further discussion, then on the original, let's please call the roll and record the vote.
Councilman Cathy.
Aye.
Councilman Powell.
Aye.
Councilman Bates.
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Aye.
Mayor Friel.
Aye.
And Councilmember Pacheco, I'm sorry, were you aye or nay?
Sorry, I was an aye.
Thank you. With all members voting aye, motion, amended motion passed, amended item.
Okay, we will move on. Please read the ordinance on third reading by title only.
An ordinance creating the City of Casper, Wyoming Local Assessment District Number 157, ordering the construction of improvements therein, describing the same, directing the preparation of plans and specifications for, providing for the publication of notice to contractors, fixing the boundaries of said district, ratifying action previously taken, and prescribing details in connection with said district.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve on third reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Vice Mayor Lutz, second by Councilman Huber. Council will now listen to public comment. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes and no duplication of speakers will be allowed. The public comment phone number is area code 307-235-8215. Do we have anyone that is called in at this time?
We do not. There are no callers.
Okay. Do we have any discussion on this item? Okay, any amendments? All right, please call the roll and record the vote.
Councilman Cathy.
Aye.
Councilman Powell.
Aye.
Councilman Bates. Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Aye.
Mayor Friel.
Aye.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Please read the ordinance on second reading by title only.
An ordinance amending Chapter 17.68 of the Casper Municipal Code pertaining to gaming, gambling in the C4 Highway Business Zoning District.
The chair would entertain a motion to approve on second reading the ordinance just read.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilman Hopkins, second by Councilman Cathy. Council will now listen to public comment. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes and no duplication of speakers will be allowed. The public comment phone number is area code 307-235-8215. Do we have anyone that is called in at this time?
We do not.
Do we have any discussion? Any amendments? Please call the roll and record the vote.
Councilman Cathy.
Aye.
Councilman Powell.
Aye.
Councilman Bates.
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
Aye.
Mayor Friel.
Aye.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Move on to the first reading ordinance item tabled at the April 21st meeting for liquor license ordinance amendments. This item was tabled to a date certain of May 5th, 2020, after the public hearing at the April 21st, 2020 council meeting. Please read the ordinance on first reading by title only.
An ordinance updating and amending sections of Chapter 5.08 of the Casper Municipal Code.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve on first reading the ordinance just read.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Powell, second by Vice Mayor Lutz. Mr. City Manager, do you have a report?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is the item that was tabled pursuant to the business meeting of a couple weeks ago. Members of the city council have had the opportunity to visit with liquor licensed dealers in the community to gather their feedback with respect to potential recommendations along the lines of what's being proposed in the ordinance currently. Some of the feedback that staff has taken is more specific to the open container area that's being proposed as a part of this. The question that was posed actually is twofold, and I'm sure this is something that the attendees of the liquor license dealers meetings have heard as well, and that's with respect to insurance and what opportunities the city would have to participate in that. And our response would be that the city would not want to participate in trying to insure an activity of this scope and nature. Secondly, the question that was posed to staff was with regard to whether or not the container area, I should say, can be expanded to include the area near the cheese barrel as well, if this should move forward. And so with that, Mr. Mayor, I'd defer the floor to you and your colleagues to consider this item.
Okay. Council will now listen to public comment. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes and no duplication of speakers will be allowed. Public comment phone number is area code 307-235-8215. Do we have anyone that is called in at this time?
We do not.
Okay. Discussion. Councilman Hopkins.
you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Lutz, I would like you to chime in here when you get a chance, but several of the things that we talked about with the liquor dealers, some of the real biggie is opening up pretty much all of downtown to open container issues. With that in mind, I've drafted just some few ideas that we might want to consider. And I'm not saying we stop this now. I'm just saying that I would like John Henley's input into these conditions. I've got 5 conditions for open container areas. First of all, I think the area making it geographically that large is a real problem. But second, I would say that I would like to have a hand stamp any event selling alcoholic beverages in the area. It can only be credit card purchases. You can't do cash. That way we can track who bought what from who. You have to have insurance coverage with specific rider agreeing to joint and several liability for anybody that's in the area. You have to have tips trained servers, and you have to have a man perimeter berries for each vendor. And that just, it still allows for open container issues. But quite honestly, I'm really skeptical of whether a vendor selling liquor can get insurance to just sell on the street. I don't think that's possible based on discussions. Councilman Luce, any comments there?
No, I mean, Bob nailed all of the concerns. I think what we're really struggling with the open containers because of the fact that it's such a large area, the feedback we're getting is that it's ultimately not going to be possible to insure it. And so, you know, we've reached out to a handful of different people to ask their circles for input on how other communities handle this. Obviously, you know, it would not be in our best interest for the city to be providing that insurance. And so we're just interested in waiting kind of on feedback from that.
Councilman Hopkins, I guess back to the tips training itself. If they are going to be selling alcohol, it's going to have to be a licensed distributor of alcohol that does that, and they're required now anyways to have tips training. So would that not take care of that issue?
Well, I think it might, but the idea of just having the whole area as open container, we somehow have to track who's selling what to who. Because if you have one guy that overserves, so to speak, he serves 8 beers to one guy within a 3-hour period, that guy is the bad actor. And to put every bar or every liquor license to that kind of a test would be almost impossible. You wouldn't know who the guy bought from, and that's why I said you have to have a hand stamp. But I understand the whole thing is just a big problem. Even though I know we got people who want to do it.
Well, and I guess take it a step further too. I mean, even a hand stamp isn't going to stop people from walking back over to a vehicle per se if they have alcohol in there, and then they drink alcohol out of their vehicle. I mean, then we end up with the same type of an issue, and it's not necessarily an over-serving issue; it's an over-consumption issue, which then I would assume that public intox laws would kick in and they would be handled that way. But I definitely see where you're coming from. I just don't know that can be totally stopped, because you know somebody's going to go out and try and drink alcohol out of their own car and then make their way back in.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I concur with your analysis. The only thing I can point to is when you go to the Wyoming game, they check your cooler, and we don't have that ability in the whole area of downtown.
Mr. Manager, in order to, if we were to obviously cut this down, I mean, what would we need to do? Just come back on the next reading with a revised version of what that map would be? Because really, realistically looking at it, Second Street out to First Street, when you get down there where like US Bank is and the vacant fields and stuff like that, there's, there really is no point at this point in time. And the only thing I can really see on that far end that, by moving that boundary up, say back towards, you know, Elm or Oak or something like that, the only person I could see would really be cutting out would be like Ad Bay and things like down in that area. And I do know occasionally they have, but those are usually on their own personal property. So could we condense that down and come back at the next meeting and with a reduced version?
Mr. Mayor, that's absolutely a possibility. Basically, what we would do is bring you amended language that would be included in the, you know, an amendment proposal that would be more reflective of the various border streets and that kind of thing to be more reflective of a condensed area. You bet.
Is there anybody who would have an issue with condensing that down? Okay, and Councilman Powell.
Thank you, Your Honor. You know, obviously we're not the only community that's tried to wrestle with this, and I think this initially came up, if I remember right, Councilman Johnson was pointing out that we had a permit at the Yellowstone Grill and a permit at the David Street Station, and there was a 50-feet section between the two where a person couldn't carry their beer from one venue to the other. And so those, and that we had a reasonably positive experience with the brief amount of time we had the eclipse. Other than that, you know, to me, we're kind of flying blind unless we do some research with law enforcement in other communities that have tried this to see if these worst case scenarios where people are drinking out of their cars or there's a lot of people just falling down on the streets or creating risk for other citizens. I guess I'd like to learn a little more about other communities that have experienced this and obviously what Chief McFeeters might be concerned about. So, I mean, I'd like to see us move forward if we can, but I also want to learn a little more about how this has worked in other places where it's been tried.
Okay, Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you. Councilman Powell, I concur with what you're saying. And that's one of the reasons that the fifth condition that I put down there, you have to have man perimeter barriers for each vendor. And the example, I've lived downtown for a long time, and Frosty's every year parade day has a barrier in front of part of their parking area. And that typically has been a problem. We've had on the float. So they have a barrier where they, so I barrier. I think that's, I concur with Councilman. We need to study this further before we open up the entire downtown to open container.
Okay, any other discussion? Councilman Bates.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mayor. I said from the get-go I wasn't a fan of this, having open alcohol container, and so I'm still not for it. But yet on the other side of it is I'm kind of either all for one or none at all, meaning either if we're going to open up alcohol and we're going to do it downtown, that's profiting those businesses down there that sell that, and the rest of the city is not a part of profiting from that. And I guess I'm saying is if we're going to open it up downtown, I think we should open it up to the city, because I look at East Side with the growth over there by Kohl's, by the theater, the one on the west side by the theater with Fuzzy's coming in, Fuzzy's Taco coming in, and others. They may want to open up more places in those areas that will want to do the same thing, have a venue in those areas, where people can go from one spot to the other. So I guess on my side is, even though I'm against the totally, but if we're going to allow one area to profit, I think the entire city needs to have an opportunity to profit from having open alcohol containers. That's just my opinion and how I feel.
Okay, any other discussion? Any amendments? Do we need to do an amendment on that for the?
Mr. Mayor, if council's not prepared to identify kind of the geographic boundaries, we can work on that in the interim, bring you a proposal, and see what you think if that warrants a fair amendment to consider, okay. if council would desire.
So is everybody okay with allowing staff to give us a revised map of the downtown area and the geographical boundaries of it? Councilman Huber.
Mr. Mayor, I think that that would have to be something that would come up as a proposed amendment on second reading. And so I think that's what you want to do. I think what we should do at this point is just go forward with this as it is. And then if people want to make an amendment at second reading or third reading, we can always do that.
Agreed. Okay. Okay. So any amendments at all anybody wants? Okay. So then let's please call the roll and record the vote.
Councilman Cathey.
Aye.
Councilman Powell.
Aye.
Councilman Bates.
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins. Vice Mayor Lutz.
Aye.
Mayor Friel.
Aye.
All members voting aye, motion passed.
All right, I understand that the attorneys need additional time for wordsmithing on the College National Finals Rodeo contract extension. So at this time, the chair would entertain a motion on this item to remove it from consent and a motion to postpone the item.
I move to remove the item from the contract extension for hosting the College National Finals Rodeo from the consent agenda.
Moved by Vice Mayor Lutz. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Cathey. Any discussion? Any amendments? Please call the roll and record the vote.
Councilman Cathey. Councilman Cathey.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilman Powell. Councilman Bates.
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins. Vice Mayor Lutz.
Aye.
Mayor Friel.
Aye.
All members voting aye. Motion to remove the item from consent passed.
Okay. I move to postpone the contract extension for hosting the College National Finals Rodeo to a date certain of May 19th, 2020.
Movement was made by Vice Mayor Lutz. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Powell. Any discussion? Any amendments? Please call the roll and record the vote.
Councilman Cathey.
Aye.
Councilman Powell. Councilman Powell.
Councilman Powell.
You can't We just all say it like a chorus.
There you go.
Councilman Powell?
Something happened, you can't.
Uh-oh. Councilman Bates?
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco?
Aye.
Councilman Huber?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz?
Aye.
Aye.
Mayor Friel?
Aye.
Thank you. And Councilman Powell did give us a thumbs up, so all members voting aye, motion passed.
Please read the consent resolutions by title only.
Item 13A1, a contract amendment with the Casper Area Transportation Coalition. Item 13A2, declaring certain city-owned property as surplus property. Item 13A3, a contract for outside city water and sewer with Jericho Cleaning Systems. Item 13A4, a contract for outside city water with Ashton J. and Joanna Wilson. Item 13A5, an agreement with Myers & Sons for the wastewater treatment plant secondary treatment and rehabilitation project. Item 13A6, an agreement with SWI LLC for the solid waste fencing project. Item 13A7, an acceptance of a Homeland Security Program grant. Item 13A8, authorizing a change order number 2 with Shamrock Environmental Corporation for the North Platte River Restoration First Street Reach project. Item 13A9, correcting a Scrivener's error in the resolution and subdivision agreement with the White Dog Edition number 2. And item 13A10, authorizing a collective bargaining contract with the firefighters local union 904.
Chair would entertain a motion to adopt the consent resolutions just read.
So moved.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Bates, second by Councilman Hopkins. City Manager, would you like to comment on any of the items? Okay. Please call the roll and record the vote.
Councilman Kathy?
Aye.
Councilman Powell?
He's got something wrong.
Councilman Bates?
Okay, Councilman Powell should be in now.
I think I can hear you now. Okay. Sorry, I was out for about 2.
I think you can call him again.
Okay, so Councilman Powell?
I can hear you now, I believe, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we're taking a vote on the consent resolutions, and we're at you now.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilman Bates?
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco?
Aye.
Councilman Huber?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz?
Aye.
Mayor Friel?
Aye.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Please read the consent minute action titles.
Item 14A1, rejecting bids for the Mike Cedar Pickleball Courts project. Item 14A2, the purchase of firefighting turnout gear from L.N. Curtis & Sons. And item 14A3, the submission of a Wyoming Association of Municipalities resolutions.
Chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent minute action agenda items just read.
So moved, Ken.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Bates, second by Councilman Kathy. Please call the roll and record the vote.
Councilman Kathy?
Aye.
Councilman Powell? Councilman Bates? Pardon me, Councilman Bates?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilman Pacheco?
Aye.
Councilman Huber?
Aye.
Councilman Johnson?
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz?
Aye.
Mayor Friel?
Aye.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
Okay, we'll move on to introduction of measures and proposals by members of the city council. And before we do that, though, I want to bring you guys up to, everybody on council up to speed on a few items that have taken place this last week. Dealing with COVID-19 and things that have been happening around the city. So the first thing I want to bring up is we did do a PSA announcement probably a week and a half ago. We actually built the PSA announcement around masks, in the wearing of masks within the city. That PSA was a recommendation. Actually, where we were headed with it was they were looking at making it mandatory wherever we went, and we wanted to take the approach of educating the public that it's recommended that when you're in stores and whatnot, you should wear a mask to cut down on the transmission of the virus. We've gotten a lot of feedback that people feel that they're being mandated to do that. You're not. So I just want to make that clear. I don't think it's been put out in the public anywhere, but the government is not making you wear a mask. We're asking that when you're in larger crowds, you make sure that you wear it so that we can cut down on the transmission of the virus. But it says in all the guidelines that we've written, you should wear a mask. It does not say you have to wear a mask. So I just want to make that clear. We've heard that numerous times this week, and I think it just needs to be put out there. Secondly, over the last 3 weeks, I'm going to have the chief come up here in a minute and talk if he would like to. Over the last 3 weekends, actually 3 weekends ago, it started off with a car show cruise night on Saturday night at, I believe, Smith's parking lot is where it began. And officers went out there. All along, I don't think I guarantee you that there's no citizen within the community itself that knew we were going to get COVID-19, wanted to get COVID-19. Nobody asked for this virus to come here. And so the entire time, what we've been trying to do is balance the health of the community along with the economy and not let this town implode. 3 weeks ago, when they had the first cruise night, we understand that people are tired of being cooped up. They're tired of not being able to go to work and tired of being at home. Realistically, we didn't want to take the route of arresting anybody or writing any citations on health orders. It seemed like people were being somewhat reasonable and following along with social distancing. However, since then, 2 more weekends have gone by. And 2 weekends ago, it was getting a little bit out of hand, but last weekend it was flat out appalling that there is this, it's not even a specific group. There's individuals within the group that have been attending this Saturday night cruise night that have absolutely disregarded the law. And I'm not talking about the laws that have to do with county health orders or anything else. It's everyday basic law that's been on the books forever. The picture that's up in front of you right now is one that I took this morning, and I don't know if we have any others, but this is out in front of El Marco Lanes on O'Connor Street. Between that and you can see the Arby's right there in front of you. And that is all black tire marks, skid marks from burnouts that were taking place Saturday night, and actually for the last 2 weekends right in that area. And it is all over that street. Now, county health laws the laws that were put out as far as protecting everybody, as far as the virus goes and social distancing and whatnot, masks for important places like getting your hair cut, the things that were put in place don't cover this. This is covered by everyday law and has been. And in my opinion, and anybody that wants to speak up most certainly can, and I'll give you a moment here, but this is everyday common sense that this is not to happen. It's against the law. It's been against the law. The unfortunate thing is that this event got so big that honestly, I feel like we were outnumbered, law enforcement wise, to be able to handle this. We still have officers making traffic stops, and we have people blatantly being lawless and doing these type of activities, knowing that they're not gonna, you know, we don't have a way of handling it. Or at least with the manpower that was on the street, we didn't. With that being said, I think things are gonna be a bit different, I'm assuming this weekend, and absolutely have no issues, personally myself, in paying the overtime that it takes to get people back into conforming what the laws on the books say. So with that, I'll let Chief McFeeters add his 2 cents in there.
Mr.
Chief?
Mayor, Council, thank you for giving me the opportunity to address this. You know, heretofore, the Casper Police Department was trying to allow people to exercise a little bit of free will on their own behalf if they wanted to go out and cruise. We weren't trying to interfere with that. This last weekend's events, however, crossed the line. You can watch in the videos of my officers making traffic stops, that even as they are speaking with one driver, other drivers are taking advantage of that opportunity. And in the background of our videos taken from our cameras, you can see the burnouts happening. I myself have personally been to some of the private parking lots, some of the public roadways in this area to inspect. Some of our roadways have been damaged, actually cut through the outer layer of the roadway, making our roadways susceptible to potholes and needing resurfacing. This coming weekend, we cannot allow this type of unlawful and blatantly unsafe activity to continue. We've already established a very strong task force to address these concerns, to make sure that this no longer occurs. So this coming weekend, we will have a supervisor, a K-9 officer, a traffic officer, and 4 additional officers that will be dedicated specifically to enforcing the traffic laws in this extended area of CY Avenue and other areas of our community. I do not want to send the message that, hey, we're going to be here, so go somewhere else and conduct this reprehensible activity. And so we will be aggressively working it. I can tell the public that may be listening to this today, I've already given the directive that there will be no warnings, there will be no written warnings, that everything will result in arrest or citation. The citations that are applicable, we've identified many of them. The state statute, which is adopted by our city ordinances, which allows for an immediate arrest, is reckless driving. We have a city ordinance that pertains to careless driving, which is a citable offense. I would ask those that would be so inclined to engage into this conduct to remember what this will do to their insurance rates, let alone the costs of the fine. For those people that whose activities are egregious enough to warrant arrest, that will also result in the towing of their vehicle. Where I can show that their conduct was damaging a public property, in other words, the surface of the roadway, we plan on charging them with the applicable city ordinance of destruction of public property also. And so we're going to have a lot of officers dedicated to it. It's important for me to remind people that we would not be doing this had it been for the reasonable conduct of our citizens that would not have warranted such a response from their police department. We want people to have safe transit on our roadways. We want the public that is just passing by, even the people that are just there on the sides of the road, to be safe. The conduct that we have had this last weekend was unacceptable. We will be addressing it very strictly. Lastly, I would also remind our citizens that the possession of open containers of alcohol is not warranted, it's not allowed, and we will be strictly enforcing that also. In the private parking lots where it's applicable and where it's enforceable, we will be conducting enforcement on that also.
Thank you. And I'm going to add to that to date, we have written 0 tickets relating to the health orders themselves that I'm aware of. I don't know of any ticket or citations that we've issued. Nobody's been arrested. So as far as the health orders go, it's a recurring theme for like the last 3 weeks that we have been very hands-off, understanding that people need to give back. But this is completely uncalled for. But I will say that the people that actually have been hosting this Saturday night cruise, I did have the opportunity to read a post from them today. And they take the exact same stance as what's being said here tonight, that they are appalled by what what really transpired last weekend was the worst weekend, and they are no longer meeting as a group. They do still have a route that they're wanting to have out there to where people that want to just cruise and drive can do, but they are distancing themselves from those that are doing burnouts and that are violating the law. They've even pointed out the fact that some of these speeds or the burnouts themselves, that people lose control of those cars and end up hitting people that are just out there wanting to see these cars when they cruise. They don't want to see that happen. So I will give kudos to them for at least taking a stance that that activity, what they started off as a good thing, has somewhat taken a bad turn to it, and they put it out there that they are not standing behind it. So I appreciate the fact that they did that and they put that post out there. Is there any discussion anybody wants to have about this? Okay, thank you, Chief. And then the last thing that I want to bring you up to speed on is the transition of events that took place starting last Thursday. And I don't know if anybody else was contacted. There was a local restaurant that reached out to us and expressed the fact that they wanted to open up their restaurant. And we in fact told them that the governor had not allowed that to happen at that point in time. But they seemed like they were pretty adamant they were going to make it happen. On Friday, that was on Thursday. On Friday, we had discussions with county health. And after those discussions, they got in touch with the state health department and had discussions with them. And by the end of Friday, I was able to go back and sit down with that restaurant owner and explain that we got it passed through the health department that they could not open for inside dining, but they could most certainly open up outside dining effective today. Or not today, yesterday, on Monday. And it was outdoor only. And we even went to the point of allowing them, as long as there was food, they could serve alcohol with that food, as long as that was not just alcohol on a receipt, it had to be food and alcohol. I went to this restaurant, sat down with the owner, expressed what the plan was, that they could be outside on Monday, and we were looking at Friday potentially being able to go inside, and we still are. Looks like we may even be adding bars into that on Friday, potentially, of being able to open. So we're still on track, but we're talking about a 4-day window that they would have to wait. After doing the work with the health department and getting with the state and meeting with the owner, basically shook hands and walked out of there on Friday with an agreement that's what was going to happen. Last night, they opened up, had tables outside, and then the rain came. As soon as the rain showed up, they picked up everything and moved it inside and decided that they were going to just go ahead and open up their business and serve food and alcohol, but they were open for business. And went to the point of even doing an article on TV telling them that it was basically, there's a bigger picture to it, and basically taking a stand, I guess, if you will. Again, no tickets have been written. Nobody's been taken to jail. Same individual on Thursday expressed to me that if we didn't allow it to happen, or if we did arrest him, he would have somebody to bail him out of jail, and it would be political suicide for any of us to do anything whatsoever. Well, call it political suicide or not, I really don't care, and I don't need to listen to that stuff. We've been very lenient on everything that we've done up to this point. We went to the point on Friday of doing something that nobody else is doing in the state. There's not another restaurant that I'm aware of that's opened up at this time. And we got that variance, put it in place, and they needed to simply wait 4 days to open up their restaurant on Friday. And they didn't want to wait for that. I'm not looking to arrest that person. I'm not looking to write a citation to that person. But what I would ask is that at the end of the day, I will remind it, just to be frank about it, that person also has a liquor license. And the last time I checked, violation of any kind of an order or flat out violating an order by a governor to stay closed and taking it upon themselves to open up is a pretty hefty violation that I think should be taken consideration when we sit here and talk about renewing liquor licenses. I hate to take that stance because, like I said before, we've sat here and said this for the last 3 weeks. We're letting people try and get through this. I don't want anybody going to jail. I don't want tickets written. But the fact of the matter is, somebody's going to go to the point of trying to force us to do something that we don't even have the power to. And I guess for everybody that doesn't quite understand how it works, the governor puts an order out. And I'm saying this to the public because I know everybody on council understands it. The governor puts out an order. This city council can be more restrictive on what we do, but we can't be less restrictive. We can't come in here and say, well, the governor said the restaurants have to stay closed, but we're going to open them up. That can't happen. So if I can't do it, then a restaurant owner can't do it himself. So I guess that's kind of where I'm at with it, is I'm just, I'm beyond belief that we would go to all the trouble on Friday to work for a business owner here in town to get a restaurant opened up and ask for 4 days, and then we get basically slapped right back in the face for doing a good deed. So I leave that up for discussion too, on where everybody feels on that or what you think you should do. But again, no citations, no arrest, but it just appalls me that we would go to that extent to help somebody out, and this is what we get in return. So I open that up for discussion. Councilman Bates.
All I want to say is I want to thank you on the aspect on both sides that no arrests, no citations have been given to the people over by El Marco Bowling Lane and to the restaurant that opened. It does show the kindness of the city because there was a lot of talk prior about those that were infected could have been arrested or fined, and then the fact that this stuff is going and there still hasn't been arrest or anybody been fined shows compassion to those people. And I guess I want to speak out that I hope in return they show compassion back. I am one that I want everything to open up immediately with minimum restrictions. I'm one that I'm not a fan of the mask, and I sent that out to all of you as well. I'm not a fan of this whole shutdown because of COVID-19. I'm one that don't live in fear, and I won't live in fear. I will live in freedom. But I still appreciate you, the police officers, the chief, and this council for the fact that we have shown the citizens compassion, and in return, I hope they will hear what you are saying and show compassion back by doing what is right, and our freedom continue to be given back to us week by week.
Okay, any other comments? Councilman Pacheco.
Just a couple comments to back what you're saying. Mayor, I think that you're right on in that, and it takes some courage to take a stance, I think, that is not always popular, and making sure that people understand that we're being serious. And contrary to a lot of beliefs, I would beg people to go to New York City, where the death rate has been pretty bad, and around the country where they're predicting close to 100,000 deaths, which is far surpassing Vietnam War. So there are those that will say that it's meaningless and whatnot, but I think that we have to understand that we're doing what we're trying to do for the best interest of the community, and we have been lenient. We've stayed away from draconian measures. We've tried to make sure that we stay level-headed and pragmatic in our approach to protect the community. But I think that you're right on what you said, and I, for one, support you and understand where we're coming from. And we're just asking for a little help from the community to be able to do that. And we're on our way to opening this community up and the businesses. We just needed a little more patience, and I know that's tough and it's hard. But I'm with you on that, Mayor, and I back you up on your comments and support that. And so I'll stand with you on that.
Councilman Huber.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think you've done an absolutely excellent job throughout this problem, and I really applaud you. I think that you are the right guy in the right place at the right time, and I think you've done the right things, both with the restraint that you have shown. However, I also have to appreciate the sense of indignation that I detect in your voice. My message to a business owner, a restaurateur, liquor dealer, whatever, that would directly flaunt this kind of a directive that does not come from the city but comes from the state, I think we should invite that person to come in and show cause why their license should not at least be suspended for that kind of an egregious, purposeful violation. The thing is that, what we're talking about here is public safety. It's really nice for people to talk about freedom, and I want to live free and everything, and I absolutely agree with those freedom concepts. However, one of the very fundamental functions of government is to safeguard the safety and health of our citizens. That's something that the very first Chief Justice of the United States, John Marshall, wrote about back in the early 1800s, that is a very fundamental function of government. And it always amuses me, quite frankly, that people want to talk about, we have all of these rights. Well, they talk about all their constitutional rights, but they only read part of the Constitution. They only read those things that they like. They don't read the things that they might not like. And that has been a recognized, talk about a bedrock of our community, of our system of government, clear back to before our nation was formed even, that government exists to help safeguard the safety and health of the inhabitants. I think that's a really big thing. And frankly, a lot of the conduct that I have seen and that I've heard about, we have citizens out there that are engaging in reckless conduct that's recklessly endangering other citizens. And, there's an old saying in the law that my freedom ends at the tip of your nose. I can flail my arms around all that I want to up until the point when it affects somebody else's rights. And people need to realize that. And frankly, I'd be in favor of that business owner that you're talking about that directly flaunted the governor's order and did so in the face of all the effort that you put in on their behalf. I think we should invite him in and ask him why, to show cause why his license should not be suspended.
Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councilman Huber. I tend to agree with you. I think everybody realizes that freedom has a corollary, and that corollary is responsibility. And we have somebody that becomes totally irresponsible, flaunting what's really going on. I concur. I'd like to talk to this person. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
I would just say, because everyone who's truly following this and knows, there's been no such directive given by City Council for any of this. It is all from the Health Department or for the governor, and what I would say on that is, I've had the opportunity to meet with individuals from the EOC, which I believe stands for Emergency Operations Center, and the JIC, which is the Joint Information Center. Okay, sorry, I didn't know it was committee or center. And also our health department. And I don't think people realize just how hard that group of individuals are working. Not only are they working on a reopening plan, you know, night and day, every single minute, they're also working on getting these exemptions passed through. There are obviously 23 other counties in this state that are also trying to get exemptions in. I'm sure getting that 5 minutes on the phone with the state health officer or another member down at the state takes a lot of work. And that group of people is working ridiculously hard to get this community back open and in a safe manner. And we have to recognize their hard work.
And I just want to jump on the tail end of what you're saying there, and just reiterate the fact that our county right now, I think, is the only county that is working on getting restaurants open. We're planning on, at this point, barring anything happen, we're planning on having them open on this Friday. And up until today, bars were not even a thought that it was going to happen. And they have been working diligently in getting those added onto it so that they can open back up. So it's a phased-in approach, but we are looking at where we're at, and we are pushing to try and get things back open in a healthy and very responsible manner. So the people that think that we're just sitting back and we're the ones saying no, we're quite the opposite. We're the ones that are pushing to try and get things back open, get this economy going again. And I just want everybody to understand that. For the majority of people that are doing what you're supposed to be doing, thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't thank you enough. And continue to do what you're doing. The other ones that aren't, you know, I don't know what to say. I mean, I think I've said it about all. Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to make a comment that, you know, I've been a staunch supporter of individual basic civil liberties, and I always will be. But I will say that people need to be smart, that driving like an idiot down CY has always been against the law, and it always will be, and people need to obey the traffic laws. And I would agree with Councilman Huber that it is a fundamental job of the government to protect the welfare of the people, but there's also a line and a balance. And I think this outbreak has tiptoed that line quite a bit, not necessarily in Casper, but just nationwide. So I just wanted to basically say that though I have been a staunch supporter of people's basic civil rights, I still believe that people need to be responsible. And if you are out there breaking other laws that have always been in existence, and putting other people at risk with your crazy behavior, then the punishment should come in that case. So and that's all I have tonight.
Thank you. Councilman Powell. Councilman Powell, you're still muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I also applaud you, Mr. Mayor, for your handling of these situations. These are very difficult situations, and like every other community in the country, we are dealing with the fatigue associated with this. And of course, we have many citizens who are in desperate straits financially with these restrictions. The reason I asked my question during the pre-meeting about what are we going to do if we're wrong and we are moving too fast, I think we have unfortunately set up our public health officials with the possibility of being vilified by the community if they have to say, look, we went too fast. We're going to have to walk back on some of these things that we've done. And that's a real possibility. And if people don't think it is, just look at what happened in Louisiana when they had Mardi Gras. The entire state had a very serious bout with this virus. It's not something to play around with. And so I'm fine with us doing this experimentation, and I'm even fine with us being in the lead as far as opening up some of these restrictions. But we as leaders have got to be prepared for the possibility that we're making the wrong call, not because we just don't know, and no one knows about this virus and what is going to happen. And so what I'm worried about is that the entire community is going to have this expectation that one by one we're going to knock down these restrictions in a very systematic way, and that it's all going to get back to the way things were before in very short order without any possibility of walking these things back. And we may be wrong, and we may have to be the ones, regardless of all these silly threats people make of voting you out of office or whatever, and do the right thing. But we have got to be prepared for that possibility that the opening up process may be going too fast. And what are we going to do when that happens? We have to protect people like Dr. Dowell and and Dr. Harris and our health department people if that happens. So, and it is a possibility.
Councilman Powell, I would just respond back to you in saying that I feel very confident in our leadership meetings that we've had, and these have been these decisions. Again, we don't have the power to make these decisions ourselves. It's being done with all the leadership, to include the doctors and county health and the commissioners and ourselves being represented there, that these decisions are being made. And I guarantee you, with these doctors, they would not make a recommendation to move forward on anything if they felt that we were doing the wrong thing. I know that there's a plan in place if we have to, for some reason, backtrack, but we're moving forward with caution. So if it seems like we're moving quick, maybe we are, but at the same time, I don't think that any of these, in fact, I know that all the people involved are not going to make a move if they feel that it is going to endanger the public or anybody else. So I'm confident in what they're doing, and I stand by them, and I do know that there's a plan. If by chance we get a spike for some reason in numbers, there's a plan in place, and you know, we'll just have to deal with it if that comes. And Councilman Powell, I think you wanted to add something.
I'm sorry, I may have misspoke. I didn't mean to in any way offer criticism or suggest that these were not the right decisions to make. I'm just worried that the community is developing an expectation that this is all over now, and I'm worried about that expectation. And I think that's what you're dealing with in the Smith's parking lot and with this restaurant owner, and that this is all inevitable, that this is going to go away and we'll be done with it. And we may, let's hope we are, but we may not. And so I'm just simply saying that as a group, I think we need to be prepared for the possibility that we're wrong. I hope we are not. I'm not questioning the decisions made by the EOC or the doctors or their commitment or whatever. I just believe that there are just too many unknowns with all of this. And people, it's just not the right time for us to let our guard down.
And I agree with what you're saying, and I'll reiterate again that it depends on what happens this week as to whether we move forward on Friday or not. I'm telling people the direction we're headed, where we're hoping to be on Friday, but if everything doesn't align until the state health officer signs off saying this is what you can do, you can't do it. And simple as that. And if Friday comes and they say you can't do it, we have to go by what they say. But I feel optimistic at this time that we're moving in the right direction and we can see some things happening. Did you have something else? Okay. Anybody else have anything more on this subject here? Okay, so let's go around the table. Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can only tell you that along the lines of what you and Councilman Powell have been talking about, should things turn south on us, I'm people that's more than willing to bite the political bullet and
Thank you. Councilman Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I certainly recognize that there are a lot of people, not only in our community, but all over the country, all over the world, that have suffered a great deal and are paying a pretty severe price because of this pandemic. And I am very, very sympathetic and feel great compassion for anyone who's is suffering at all. But we have to keep in mind that my understanding of the science, medical science on this, is that what we're seeing today is basically a snapshot of what was going on 2 weeks ago with reference to infestation and infection. And so, you know, people need to remember that there's like a time delay. It's not like, okay, you know, we can tell today what's going on today. What we can tell today is how many people got infected a week or 10 days or 2 weeks ago, and now they're manifesting illness. And so we've got to remember that too. And people, you know, we just need to remember that it's not only we have to be responsible for ourselves, but we cannot be endangering other people's health either. And that's a bigger thing. But other than that, I don't have anything else to say tonight. Just hang in there, everybody.
Thank you. Councilman Johnson.
I don't have anything else tonight, thanks.
Thank you. Councilman Powell.
Sorry, Your Honor. This may seem trivial given what we've been talking about, but I think it's interesting that we celebrated Clean Water Week, and we're also dealing with the recycling issue. One of the issues we have with recycling is people using disposable water bottles, when in fact the water coming out of their tap is every bit as good as the water that they buy in these plastic bottles that people insist on using and throwing in the trash, or thinking it's okay to do that if they recycle it, because it's not. It's a goofy thing that's taken hold in our society. If it were completely up to me, we'd tax every one of those water bottles 25 cents to pay for the cost of disposing of them. Our water in the city of Casper is excellent. And all people are doing when they buy these water bottles at Albertsons or wherever, they're buying water that came out of somebody else's municipal water system and got bottled and shipped here. So our water is excellent here, and I hope people will drink it and stop using these silly disposable water bottles that you see at every meeting you go to, every place you go, they've got them, and that is how we get out of the recycling dilemma. If people are a little more mindful of creating all this unnecessary trash. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilman Pacheco.
I just want to continue to reiterate for the community to continue to be safe and make good choices and common sense. Wear a mask if that's your based upon data, based upon what the federal government has said the mask. So wear that. Obviously, we're not telling you to, but please think about doing that. Wash your hands and just be safe when you're doing that. There's plenty of data and scientific backing to say that, granted, we have a small number here in the state of Wyoming. Thankfully, we're blessed for that. But that still could affect someone that's not healthy. So we always have to keep that in mind. So it's about personal responsibility. I agree with Councilman Huber on that too. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Councilman Cathy.
Just thanks for all your hard work, Mr. Mayor and Mr. City Manager, and want to say thanks to all of the people in the hospitals and the first responders that are still staying out there on the front lines. And we need as citizens to hang in there, and as you stated, there is some personal responsibility that needs to go along with this, and we need to remember that. And by the same token, you know, you give up some of your freedom for security and you have neither, as Ben Franklin said as well. So we need to temper all of the things we try to do at this point. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Bates.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of things. One, couple of emails that we all received. I don't know who all respond to it. One of them was, and I didn't mention it during the discussion about the alcohol ordinance, but one of the emails that asked to support for including 12 off-premises permits for manufacturers in Casper's ordinance. So I don't know if Mr. Henley, you could look into that. And then the other one that I've received a couple of emails, and I think we all have, regarding alcohol delivery, allowing businesses to, people to call into businesses, tell them what they want, and them to be able to deliver alcohol to keep people from maybe getting on the road driving drunk. And I don't know if that's something that we could look at with the next reading, and maybe if we can make an amendment to put that in there. Again, Mr. Henley, if that's an option, we could look at. But that's a few things that was asked about. So I'd ask council to read that email, see what you think, consider it. I think both of them are a good idea. The other one, that email that I want to believe that we all received, to my knowledge, and I could be wrong on this one, I apologize, let me get to it, was from a gal named Tricia, and she is not in favor of the recycling bins being moved, but education, and she is willing to step up and do whatever she has to do, or gather other people to educate people more on what is good to recycle, what is not good to recycle. And I think that's pretty awesome that a member of our community is stepping up saying, hey, I don't want to lose it. I'm willing to do something for it. I don't know how to start it. She would like some ideas. If any of you don't have that email, let me know. And if you have an idea to help her out with that, I'll be glad to send that to all of you guys. But I just thought that was really cool that somebody's saying, hey, I want to help educate people. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this part of the agenda. First of all, I want to thank the council for their support throughout this real challenging time. Mr. Mayor, yourself as well. Thank you for hanging in there. But the real reason I need to visit with council for just a second, one of the ideas that was proposed, and I'm not sure if it was a directive or not, was with regard to having staff come back and talk about the container area, the open container area, and educate the council, as someone said, on this idea, or provide more information about it, learn a little more about it, however it was put. I'm not sure what if staff was told to do that, or if that was an idea that hasn't seen direction yet.
So I think there were two things. Reduction of the area itself. Right. I brought that up. And I think Councilman Powell brought up, he wanted, and correct me if I'm wrong, Councilman Powell, but he wanted some more information, as maybe it wasn't on that issue. It was.
Yeah, I think Your Honor, if I may, I think that he was wanting more law enforcement input as to how other communities, what their experiences have been.
Yep. Mr. Henley.
Thank you, Mayor. just one question, and Councilman Bates, I'm sorry, but I didn't pick up the first item. You talked about something about manufacturers, but you were a little muffled on this side. I understand the second item, the alcohol delivery question, and then I heard you talk about the lady who wanted to help with the recycling, but I missed that first part. You were talking about the alcohol ordinance and something about manufacturing, but I couldn't pick it up. If you could repeat that, that would be helpful to me.
Yes, she mentioned, the email mentioned 12 off-permission permits for manufacture. So, 12 off-permission permits to serve alcohol manufacturers. Or manufacturers.
Okay, I think I understand. Thank you.
Off-premise permits. I think that all came from Amber Pollock from Backwards Distillery, and we could forward you that email.
And actually, Mayor, Councilman, that is in the ordinance we have it right now. We do, it's part of state statute. They were looking for 24, I think, at the state legislature, and they came back with 12. So we've included that in the ordinance as it stands.
Yeah, so I think we want to get a thumbs up or a thumbs down direction of condensing the open container area downtown, first of all. So I guess thumbs up or thumbs down on that. Okay, looks like we got a thumbs up. And then the second part of that is getting more information on law enforcement around the state, how they're dealing, or just law enforcement in general, how they're dealing with open container permits and whatnot. Similar to, so a thumbs up or thumbs down on that. Thumbs up. Thank you. You bet. Thank you. Okay, Vice Mayor Lutz.
Just remind people that the recycling survey, I guess you could call it, as far as how the City of Casper continues with the residential recycling program, that survey went live today on the City of Casper website. So if you could please get on there, we would really appreciate that feedback. And I just feel like it's very important, and I just want to reiterate, you should be concerned if a politician is simply voting to be reelected. You should be very concerned, and I don't think there are many of us on this council who would put themselves in that category. We're voting on what's right, not voting on things to get more votes.
Thank you. I think I've said about all I need to say tonight. The only thing I would come back and say is that, I hate seeming like we're punishing the masses for the misdeeds of a few. So to the masses that are doing it right, I just say thank you and everything that's taken place over all these weeks. And I appreciate the people that are doing it right and the people that want to be lawless out there, that things that are on the books today you're going to get cited for. I mean, I think we're finally at that point of, there's a fine line between being nice and letting things kind of slide and drawing a line in the sand of saying a violation of the law is a violation of the law, and we're at that point. So, again, I want the economy to get back open. I want it to be in a healthy manner. I want it a nice balance to keep everybody healthy and safe, but get this economy rolling again. And I know more than anybody right now, because I get the calls every day, we need to get it open, and I get it. And we're doing it as the laws allow us to do it, and as the people above us allow us to do it. And we're asking the right questions of the right people to get things done. So please bear with us in getting it done, and let's get back. I hate the word our new normal, but let's try and get back to some sense of normalcy and get our lives going again. So it's about all I have for tonight. So the next meeting of the City Council will be a work session to be held at 4:30 p.m. Tuesday, May 12th, 2020, and a regular council meeting to be held at 6 p.m. Tuesday, May 19th, 2020. With the location of these meetings to be determined. Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Ken.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Bates, second by Councilman Cathy. Please call the roll and record the vote.
Councilman Kathy.
Aye.
Councilman Powell.
Aye.
Councilman Bates.
Aye.
Councilman Pacheco.
Aye.
Councilman Huber.
Aye.
Councilman Johnson.
Aye.
Councilman Hopkins.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Lutz. Mayor Friel.
Aye.
With all members voting aye, motion passed.
This meeting is adjourned.